Most people think negotiations are won with better arguments. They're not. In fact, some of the worst negotiators I've ever met were brilliant, knowledgeable, and completely prepared, and they still lost. Why is that? Because they were negotiating the facts while the other person was negotiating the emotions. If you've ever walked out of a meeting wondering why that conversation suddenly turned against me, or why did they reject a proposal that clearly made sense, the answer is often hidden in emotional signals that most people never notice. Today I want to show how to recognize those signals, and more importantly, how to redirect them before they derail the conversation. Because in high-stakes negotiations, emotional intelligence isn't a soft skill, it's leverage. Most people focus on what is being said. The best negotiators focus on what is being felt. Think about it. The client says, "We'll have to think about it." Most people hear hesitation. A skilled negotiator asks, what emotion produced that hesitation? Is it fear, risk, lack of trust, pressure from someone else? The words are rarely the real issue. The emotion behind them usually is. And if you address the words without addressing the emotion, you're solving the wrong problem. Let's start with some common cues. Not because they guarantee anything, but because they often indicate emotional shifts occurring beneath the surface. A sudden change in tone, for instance. Someone who was energetic suddenly becomes short. Their answers become brief, their enthusiasm disappears. Most people immediately push harder. That's a mistake. A change in tone is often more important than the actual words being spoken. Something changed. Your job is to discover what changed, not force the conversation forward. You ask a simple question. The response becomes unusually detailed or emotional. People often interpret this as resistance. Sometimes it is, but often it indicates insecurity or perceived threat. The conversation is no longer about the topic. It's about protecting identity. And once identity becomes involved, logic becomes less effective. If someone keeps raising the same concern in different forms, pay attention. The objection itself may not be the real issue. It's often acting as a shield for something they don't want to say directly. Many negotiators keep answering the objection. The better move is exploring what's underneath it. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine you're discussing a promotion with your manager. You present strong results. You exceed expectations. You prepared your case. Your manager says, "I'm not sure the timing is right." Most people immediately start defending their accomplishments. But here's what emotionally intelligent negotiators do differently. They become curious. Instead of arguing, they ask, what concerns you most about the timing? Now the real issue emerges. Maybe budget constraints, maybe internal politics, maybe concern about team reactions, maybe uncertainty from upper management. Suddenly you're discussing the actual obstacle instead of fighting a surface objection. That shift alone changes the entire negotiation. Let's say you're presenting a proposal. The client initially seems interested. Then they begin focusing on price, again and again. Many people assume the problem is cost. Often it isn't. Price is frequently the safest objection. Safest one available anyway. The real issue might be risk or trust. Fear making the decision wrong could come into it, or fear looking foolish if the project fails. When you recognize the emotional driver, your response changes. Instead of defending price, you begin reducing perceived risk. And that's often what closes the deal. Now let's talk about the most important skill, redirecting emotion without creating resistance. Most people challenge emotions directly. That's rarely effective. Instead, acknowledge first, redirect second. For example, I can understand why that would be frustrating. Then pause. Then let's look at what would need to happen for this to feel like a better option. Notice what happened. You didn't argue, you didn't surrender, you didn't agree. You simply lowered emotional temperature before moving the conversation forward. People become more flexible when they feel understood, not when they feel defeated. This is where many intelligent professionals lose negotiations. The moment emotion appears, they double down on logic. More facts, more explanations, more evidence, more persuasion. But emotions don't disappear because facts arrive. They disappear when concerns are addressed. The smartest person in the room often loses because they're solving an intellectual problem when the other person is experiencing an emotional one. That's why emotional intelligence often beats raw intelligence in negotiation. What powerful negotiators actually do? They watch for shifts. They notice hesitation. They recognize defensiveness. They detect emotional discomfort. Then they become curious rather than reactive. They ask questions instead of launching arguments. They seek the concern beneath the concern. And they remember something most people forget. People rarely make decisions based solely on logic. They use logic to justify decisions that emotions have already influenced. The next time you're in a negotiation, stop focusing exclusively on the words. Pay attention to the emotional current underneath the conversation. Because the moment you learn to identify hidden emotions, you stop reacting to negotiations. You start directing them. And often the difference between winning and losing isn't a better argument. It's recognizing what was never being said in the first place. I'm curious, what's a negotiation or high-stakes conversation where you later realized emotion, not logic, was driving the outcome? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. And remember, the most powerful conversations are rarely controlled by the person talking the most. They're controlled by the person who understands what's happening beneath the words.